Hi, it's Ileana. So today I'm going to talk about the moon. I had recently done a video about the July 15th, 16th event that was remote viewed. Cliff High had predicted that there would be a lot of UFO stuff going on, military stuff, free energy stuff, July 15th, 16th, 2024 as an event. I think these things happened behind the scenes and it was remote viewed. Dick Algier saw scientists and military type people sitting around a table in some kind of a secret meeting and looking at projections of the moon, our moon, and doing mathematical calculations and trajectories, looking at the moon and studying it for something. And I had said that mining happens on the moon. Extraterrestrials come in and mine the moon, what's on the surface of the moon. And I had said that the moon is a hollowed out spacecraft. It's a hollowed out planetoid. It had once been a full planetoid, which was hollowed out, and it has world engines, and it was placed in Earth orbit, like around Earth orbit and tidal locked, to sort of stabilize planetary environmental factors like tidal waves, impact of how much sun we get, also that we're not hit by meteorites and that there's no huge craters on Earth. That's why the moon was parked in Earth orbit, kind of like with Earth orbit, synchronized. So the surface of the moon has all the features that any planetoid or natural moon would have. It has regolith, it has a lot of layers of what anything would have that a typical moon has. So in a sense, on the surface, it can be mined. It can be mined for regolith. It can be mined for helium-3, which some extraterrestrials do. Some tall grays mine helium-3. There's different types of mining that can happen on planetoids. It's not what we might think of what extraterrestrials mine for. It might not be the substrate of regolith that they're mining. They could be mining other things like the helium-3, which they use for whatever purposes they need it for. That's what the tall grays mine on the moon when they visit. So or something like regolith or other resources, natural resources, can be mined on the surface of the moon because the moon is made to look like a real moon. It's camouflage. You still get the same things on the surface of the moon as you would get on other moons and planetoids. It has all the layers left on the surface as would be anywhere else on a planetoid or a moon structure, surface structure. It's just the inner parts that are hollowed out to house laboratories, to house world engines. So it's really about how you think about it. Yes, actually, hollowed out spacecraft planetoid will still have the same features on the surface, just not inside. It will have like nuclear reactors and other world engines to power it inside. And those are huge, and that's why it's hollowed out. There's other laboratories and research stations in those hollowed out portions inside the moon. That stuff takes a lot of space, hence it needs to be hollowed out. But on the surface, in between those surface layers, it still has its metallic portions. It still has the regolith, it has the helium, and other natural resources that beings would want to mine. So I wanted to clarify that again. A lot of materials on the surface of the moon and between the subsurface. And then you get to the hollowed out portions. And so you can't really mine internally within the moon, but you can mine the surface layers and the sub layers before you get to the hollowed out portion, to that hollowed out portion where it's inside the moon what's hidden that makes it a spacecraft, not the surface. Because on the surface you can build bases. Inside the moon, you can also build bases because it's hollowed out. There's tunnel systems. There's even evidence of volcanic activity. There's cave systems. Because once it had been a real planetoid before it was hollowed out. So remnants of that have been left over internally in the moon, because tunnel systems and caves can be used to build things inside. You're not going to totally remove everything inside a planetoid, even when it's hollowed out. You're going to leave sections for building things, like caves and tunnels. Those are useful, so those would be left. So that's kind of what I wanted to clear up about mining on the moon and internal structures on the moon. What is internally there? 4 world engines, nuclear reactors. That's what's inside that needed to be hollowed out. Spaces for that needed to be hollowed out to house that tech so the moon can literally transport itself into different galaxies and park in kind of tidal lock orbits around planets as needed. That's what the hollowed out portions are for, because those are big tech and it needs housing. It needs hollowed out spaces inside a moon or a planetoid to sustain that tech powering that kind of a camouflaged spacecraft, to make it work seamlessly so nobody notices that it's not a natural moon or a planetoid. So you don't really notice the difference unless you actually go inside. When you are technologically developed enough yourself as a species, as a civilization, then you can go inside these types of hollowed out planetoids, moons, and see what's really there. Like, if you're not that advanced, you're not going to figure out what's on the surface of the moon. It looks like any ordinary moon. Just when you hit its surface, it rings like a bell. So you know it's hollowed out. And NASA has tested that. They know that there's portions of the moon that are hollow and it's not naturally made that way. It's done on purpose because there's stuff inside this moon that powers it to make it move as needed. Those world engines, those nuclear reactors, they know about that. So they've done testing because they've hit a module, NASA hit a module on the surface of the moon, and it rang like a bell, literally, for longer than it should have. And there was activity. The ringing kept vibrating. So that's how they figured out it's not completely solid. There's portions that are hollowed out, specifically for what I just described, for those reasons. So I just wanted to discuss that a little bit more and clarify what I meant that the moon is being mined and why. The whys of it. Thank you so much.